Welcome to Lockhorn's Banger TV's weekly metal debate show, where every week we pick some of the most contentious topics in metal and Lockhorns, and we talk about the genres that make up this music that we love called heavy metal. Reminder, if you're watching this in the archive, this is a live stream show that airs 5 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday, and please, all of you, subscribe. We are this close to getting above the 50K subscriber mark. This week, we're tackling Blackened Death Metal by request. We're digging even deeper into the extreme end of the metal spectrum, and joining me once again in the studio is the one, the only, Jason Deaville. Hello, sir.
How you doing, Sam? Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. You, I think, have been promoted to status of super guest.
Super guest. I think I need that Blackened Death cape.
We need SG on a cape for Jason. Thanks for joining us and helping us out. Once again, for those of you who don't know, of course, Jason is a journalist with Bravewords.com. We're proud, our proud Canadian metal website, and also you have a new column, I believe, at Metal Injection. So, how was your summer?
It was eventful.
Yeah?
Lots of metal. Yep. Took off to Heavy Montreal for a few days.
Cool.
Got to scope out a lot of cool bands, Suffocation, Carcass. Kind of a dream come true for some of those bands. Got to hang out backstage and meet all the bands and eat the awesome food off the buffet, and from there, just working on the Metal Injection column, which a little bit of a plug.
Sure, tell me all about it.
It's about slam metal, so it's the heaviest death metal out there, and every week we kind of we tackle that genre, which hasn't been tackled too much. So it's a little difficult and fun and heavy at the same time.
We love tackling genres. That's what we do. But yeah, shout out to Metal Injection, our friends over there. They do an amazing job keeping us up to speed on everything new in metal. So yeah, last time you were here, we tackled early black metal. Had a lot of fun with that, a good debate, and we've also tackled death metal since then in our new Redux season with our beautiful brand new board. So Blackened Death Metal, I mean, how do you think this is going to go? What are your predictions here?
Well, we've kind of, like you said, we touched on the two subjects that matter most for this particular episode, being early black metal and then you and Dean with death metal. So basically what we need to do today is kind of figure out which bands take those two and from both subgenres and, you know, are the heaviest, the best, the most brutal, and figure out what to do with Blackened Death Metal.
And I think it just goes to show, you know, how infinitely complex the extreme metal scene is becoming. I mean, not that long ago, black metal and death metal were enough as titles, but clearly the plot is thickening.
It has. Who do we blame for that? The bands or the fans? I don't know.
Probably both. But
maybe us a little bit.
We'll figure that out as well. So, of course, this show is motivated by everyone watching. It's a discussion show. It's a chat show. We want to hear your opinions on Blackened Death Metal, and I want to give a shout out to everyone that is joining us. We've got people joining us from Belgium, Hungary, Poland, Portugal, La France, Romania, Serbia, Ecuador, Australia, New York City, Houston, Saskatchewan, and my home island, Vancouver Island. Welcome all, and thank you for joining us. As usual, we want to hear your opinions about Blackened Death Metal, why you have that opinion, and it's important that we remember that what we're here to do is really identify the essential bands that are Blackened Death Metal. There's a lot of bands out there, but really our criteria is bands that we can say have had an influence and an impact in creating this sound. Of course, joining us is our producer extraordinaire, Lisa Ladesseur.
Hey everybody, can you hear me this time? Am I here? Am I live this week? Yeah, great.
Working out our audio bugs. And of course, Lisa's most appropriate yet violent tool is the bell.
Pretty nice.
Ring my bell. So when she rings that bell, it's time to move on. Okay, so.
We already have a comment that they like your shirt, Sam.
Oh.
And that you look like Scott Ian, like a black metal version of Scott Ian.
Whoa.
Wow, that's kind of cool. He's a bit
Take
old,
that, Scott.
but yeah. We love Scott.
All right. I'm glad we've got the dress up right.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
we can get started now. Okay, I'm relaxed. So, Blackened Death Metal. Let's establish some ground rules. We always like to start off with sort of, what are the key characteristics that make Blackened Death Metal its own thing? Jason, let's get started. What do you think we should start with?
Well, just as it reads, Blackened Death Metal, it's death metal with blackened elements.
Right.
It's not death into black metal, which could be a different thing,
Right.
but it's blackened death metal. So basically, and it can go two ways. So it could be bands doing death metal with blackened elements, but I think it can also be black death bands that are kind of hybrid bands that they ride that middle line, not tipping for one way or the other, just kind of there, doing a bit of both. Typically, because it's death metal, you'll have the lower guitar tunings, you'll have the lower register vocals, palm muting, abrupt time changes and time signatures.
Right.
And also, I think in Blackened Death Metal specifically, there's a bit more focus on stuff like leads, maybe a little more melody, some trade-offs with dual guitars, stuff like that.
Right. So what blackens it then, in your opinion? Why tag this on the front end of it?
First and foremost, I think it's kind of aesthetic. Where the Nordic black metal band's first wave, we're touching on darker elements. They weren't necessarily overtly satanic, but I think some of the bands in Blackened Death Metal, in fact, 99% of them are tackling, subjects such as occultism, mysticism, Satanism, kind of doubled down on that those evil overtones.
Right.
So first and foremost, I think visually, aesthetically, that would be one of the hallmarks of Blackened Death Metal.
So in some ways, the genre growing out of the sort of typical lyrical and visual fare of death metal,
Sure,
the sort of gore stuff, and focusing on sort of obliteration of the planet, of the body, whatever it might be, and moving into that more occultish realm.
I think there's a good descriptor with infernal. This stuff is quite infernal.
Good word.
Yeah.
Great word.
Yeah.
Infernal Majesty. Big shout out to Canadian Classic. Okay, well, we should establish where this subgenre came from. We asked a few friends of Banger for their take. And Jason, you have a quote here from John McEntee of the band Incantation. It's a beautiful shirt. So, Jason, why don't you tell us what John said about Blackened Death Metal?
So I spoke to John, he's not French.
Very Canadian of you.
I spoke to John the other day and asked for his thoughts. And I think he's a guy that has a lot to say. If I remember correctly, they were on your board, Death Metal board at the top,
that's right.
two episodes ago.
Right.
So John said the very first wave of death metal bands were the early building blocks of Blackened Death Metal. Necrovore, early Necrophagia, early Morbid Angel, Immolation, and of course Incantation. The proto-black and death metal bands of the mid to late 80s, bands like Dark Angel, Possessed, early Creator, and early Sodom were the biggest influence on underground death metal. It's from this that bands like mine, being Incantation, began experimenting, taking death metal into more extreme blackened territories. Some of us tipped the scales in favor of death metal, while others went for a more pronounced black metal vibe. But all in all, I believe that the core sound was rooted in the same putrid ground.
Nicely articulated. Fine use of words, John. Thank you for that. Of course, Incantation is an American band, so we went across the pond to consult with a longtime friend. Gavin Baddeley, of course, is the author of Lucifer Rising and The Gospel of Filth, and has appeared in several of our films and TV series. This is what Gavin had to say about Blackened Death Metal. He says, black metal started out as a label to describe any metal with strong satanic imagery or themes. Only once the violent explosion of the Scandinavian scene made it the hippest brand of extreme music did it become a specific sound. Meanwhile, the brand drifted further from its infernal origins, as pretty much every offbeat band you can think of wanted to be associated with black metal in the hope of scoring some instant credibility, Gavin. You know, a bit of a chip. Love Gavin, though. I'd say the original Blackened Death bands were those that were associated with demonic themes with a death sound. So Deicide and Morbid Angel mainly, though I know almost nobody would agree with me. In more practical terms, I think it's become a vague catch-all for those bands that occupy the creative no man's land between death metal ferocity and black metal atmospherics. If I was being more cynical, surprise, I'd say it also includes a whole bunch of bands who want to bask in the reflected notoriety of being associated with black metal. And here's the kicker. Certainly it's a term I only recall hearing since black metal became catnip to hipsters.
Whoa. Are those fighting words?
Those are fighting words, but that's what we do on Lock Horns. Tell us what you think of Gavin's perspective there, but obviously he has a very different perspective. What are your thoughts on that, Jason?
Well, Gavin's a smart guy.
Yep.
We can't dispute that.
Yep.
But one thing I will say is that although the term might not have existed, 20 years ago, I can remember, early 90s listening to bands like Incantation or Profanatica, bands that were incorporating black and death metal and thinking, this is black and death metal. I think Black Death as a hybrid has always existed. It's always been kind of known. So I'm not sure his comment about it being a more recent tag, as a result of the hipster black metal bands is relevant.
Right.
But smarter guy than me, so I'm not sure.
That's all right. We like strong opinions. Actually, we've got some people chiming in here. We've got David Gleason. He says, 100% agree with the last sentence of Gavin's statement. And Supreme Freak 777 says, I'm well immersed with death metal, but I never heard the term blackened death metal until a few years ago. So
It's got some supporters there.
Yeah. Well, it's early days yet.
Yes.
Don't worry, everyone. We're not going to close the story yet. Okay, so let's get some bands on the board. First step is we want... Yes, Lisa.
That's my cue that we start with the legend.
Yeah.
Remind you that we now start with the legend.
Oh, thank you for the reminder, Lisa.
Legend.
What we like to do on Lock Horns is establish the legend. And really this band, I want to make it clear, is not the band that necessarily started it. And we're not talking about the forefather or the proto Blackened Death Metal band. We're really talking about the band that absolutely belongs here, and we cannot vote this band off the Lock Horns Island, so to speak. So what's your pick, Jason, for the legend?
Behemoth.
Yeah? All right. And why? Behemoth, my friend.
Do we need to explain this one? Well, okay, a few things about Behemoth. They started as a straight-up kind of second-rate black metal band in '91, with their first 3 albums being completely black metal. Not the best black metal, but taking what the Scandinavian bands were doing and throwing a Polish vibe onto it. But it wasn't until '98 with their Pandemonic Incantation album where they really started experimenting with death metal elements. And I mean, from that point on, they've been an unstoppable force. Every single album has kind of upped that aggression, kind of upped the ante on those death metal elements, but always retaining that black metal vibe in the background. I mean, not as prevalent in their later albums, per se, but still that kind of raw black metal aesthetic still is kind of an underpinning to everything they're doing.
I think it's a strong argument. They're always a band that's been difficult to categorize, I think, until people started to think of these terms of blackened death metal, and perhaps we let the cat out of the bag because we opened the show with a Behemoth clip. Let's see what everyone else has to say. Nick Ottaviano is back. Welcome, Nick. If Behemoth does not top your list, you are all doing something wrong. So far, so good. Too corpse paint to be death metal, too tech to be black metal. They do not take enough from both ends to where it's clear they are doing something different. They are the sole most important band on this list. Next up, we've got King Prince Chambermaid. Wouldn't want to stay in that hotel. Behemoth is the quintessential blackened death band. You put death metal and black metal in a blender and you get Behemoth. Simple as that. And in fact, maybe some of their riffs are quite blender-like. Leonard Reibstein, they are also the hot topic blackened death band. I mean, they're popular.
They are.
Yeah.
Every subgenre has one of them, right?
Of course.
And Behemoth just happens to be it. Now, I would say it's only because the music is so incredible it can relate to many different subsects of people and listeners.
Yeah, fair to say, I think Nurgle and Boys have earned
their keep, I think.
Their keep, definitely. They've been around the block. Okay, Lisa, what are we doing next?
We're gonna add a lot of bands.
A lot of bands.
There's a lot of bands.
Okay.
We're gonna get to as many as we can, but one that came up on the chat that I wanted to bring up first, because we all saw them recently, was Belphegor.
Okay, they want Belphegor, and before we're gonna go to the comments, we saw them live in Iceland on the end of Iceland, which was pretty awesome. So here's a clip of Belphegor for you. So there you go. Pretty intense shit. That was an intense performance.
Incredible.
I actually had never seen them live before, and I was completely blown away. Shout out to the band. It was good. I hung out with the bass player. Nice dude. So there we go. Belphegor. Tell me about this band, Jason.
Belphegor, not dissimilar to Behemoth. Started out again as a more blackened band. It wasn't until the mid-90s with their The Last Supper album and their Blood Sabbath album where they really started experimenting with death metal elements. The production values kind of amped up a little bit. There was more bass-heavy stuff, more drive, more fucking in-your-face shit. And then we move into 2005 and they released their incredible Goat-Reich Flesh Cult album. And that album literally just took Blackened Death Metal to new heights. Similar to what Behemoth was doing with Demigod, just again, in your face, unrelenting, brutal, Blackened Death.
Yep. No, I think they're in the center of the dartboard in a lot of ways, because when I was watching the show, they had that, as you were saying at the outset, that very occultish, black metal kind of aesthetic, and even in the live environment, there was a certain raspiness to the vocals, which of course I always associate with black metal, but of course there was just that sort of relentless pummeling that comes with the double bass drive and the 16th notes of the guitar. So what are people saying out here about Belphegor? We got Kyle Jones. Belphegor are the premier blackened death metal band. They've been around since the early 90s. The Fist from the East. I love that. That should be like a live album title. Belphegor is second-hand Behemoth.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. We shall discuss. Raphael Fireblade says that Belphegor belong in this list because The Last Supper was the first album to blacken death metal. Without them, there is no blackened death metal. And Brian Osorio says Belphegor is definitely pure, blackened death metal, the poster boys, if you will. So I think we're getting not a lot of horns locking on Belphegor. I think we've got general agreement. So Lisa, my sleeves are already rolled up because I'm ready for the onslaught of blackenness that's coming our way.
I'm gonna try and keep it going for you.
Okay, let's do this.
I think you'll like this next band.
Let's start with Goat Horror. I'm just gonna do a mic drop, walk off set, and listen to Goat Horror right now. Fucking love these guys. Liam Robinson says Goat Horror provides a blackened death thrash attack. You thought they were more thrash with a strong influence of NOLA sludge metal. Yes, they are a Louisiana band. T-Bone 5455, you've got to add Goat Horror. Being from the south, a lot of sludge and doom metal, but Goat Horror just turned the dial to 11 with fast songs and blackened lyrics. And Jeff Brunel says Goat Horror, please. What do you think, Jason?
Well, as Liam just said, I completely agree with the Blackened Death Thrash attack. I've never been a huge fan. I enjoy what they do. I mean, when you hear a Goat Horror song, you know it's Goat Horror.
Right.
So they do have their kind of
to them.
quintessential sound, right?
Yep.
But again, like Liam was saying, I think they take that blackened aesthetic and throw in an Americanized thrash element to it. It's tough for me to pick out the death metal stuff. That not to say that they don't belong here, because they do dip their toes into death metal territories as well. And what they're doing is something different. And
Yeah.
compared to like what these two are
You
doing.
may be opening up a proverbial blackened can of worms here with uttering the lines blackened thrash. Lisa, do we have yet another episode here? Maybe that's why I like them so much, because I am a big thrash metal fan.
Not that fast. Not that fast.
I
with
got
the
my
marker.
pen.
Not that fast with the marker.
Come
there,
on.
Sam Dunn.
Okay, what are we gonna do
Do
then?
not have consensus.
I gotta
on
earn
Goat
this, okay? You gotta lock horns with me on this one. I want to put this band on the board. Trolls Tornmark says Goat Whore is more blackened crust. The hairs are splitting. Guitar Bro 221 Goat Whore are southern black metal. Okay. David Hodson, the motherfucking Goat Whore. Huh? But aren't they more thrashy? Fine. And who farted? Question mark. Might have been me. Goat Whore, not influential.
I like that first comment, Blackened Crust. If you think of bands like I Hate God,
Yeah.
if you took I Hate God and they just became a black metal band, that would be Goat Whore, I think.
Okay, I'm not gonna. Okay, fine. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna put a question mark right here for y'all, and I'm gonna put Goat Whore up. But my counter argument is there a blackened thrash genre, or are they an island? What do you think, Jason?
I think as
Are
we
there
get
other
further
bands?
into this episode, we'll touch on some of those bands.
Uh-huh.
I'm seeing a lot of stuff in chat about bands that I consider black and thrash. A lot of bands from Australia,
Yep.
Destroyer 666,
Uh-huh,
but we'll get there.
uh-huh.
So perhaps there's another branch.
Fine. There's a question mark. God, it looks good on the board. Yes, Lisa.
Okay, one guy won't leave this alone.
Uh-huh.
So let's talk about Blasphemy.
Blasphemy, Hail
Oh.
Canada. Leonard Reibstein is back. The band that begins this style is unquestionably Canada's Blasphemy. Their influence can be seen most clearly in the so-called war metal bands like Conqueror. I mean, yeah, I haven't thought about Blasphemy in a while. What are your thoughts?
Definitely, they belong. They've been doing this stuff since about '85. Wasn't until their full length in '90 where they really kind of came into their own. But
Right.
they're a little more raw than some of these bands. Actually, a lot more raw. They incorporate kind of grindcore, early death metal elements into their blackened crust. So I think at 1990, when their debut came out full length, it was just on the starting end of the big Floridian death metal scene,
Yeah.
and some of the grindcore bands making waves in Europe.
Right.
And I think they took that aesthetic and included it in their sort of proto kind of blackened vibe.
Right.
So the album, again, I think is it definitely belongs. The band belongs up here for that specific album alone.
But can we raise the question, are they influential enough to be in the canon?
I think aesthetically and lyrically,
Yep.
perhaps.
Okay. Early band. I mean,
Very early
they're
band,
out. They're out
yeah.
of the gate early. So to their credit.
And they kind of influenced a bunch of blackened death metal bands from Canada, like Antediluvian, and can't think off the top of my head, but there's a bunch.
Yep.
So I think for that reason alone, aesthetically, lyrically, they might
Okay,
belong here.
well, I'm guilty of putting pen to board prematurely, if you ask Lisa. So we'll go to the board. Clerical Conspiracy says Blasphemy were always more of a black thrash grind crossover. Okay. If you add them, then you have to have Beherit. Is it pronounced Beherit?
It is,
I got that
yeah.
right? And Sarcophago. Yeah. And that would put you way off the death metal track. Okay. Lunar Strain 235, Blasphemy rules. The first band that should be at the top. And Francis Lefebvre says, yes, Blasphemy. Okay, you know what, Lisa? Do I have permission to write something on the board?
I think you got one
if
behind you.
If it starts with B.
It starts with B. Do I have a magnet? Oh,
I believe
do.
you do.
I think for Canadian pride reasons, we made a magnet.
They were one of my choices, yes.
Okay.
So
There you go. Blasphemy looks good on the board. Okay, Blasphemy's in, folks. So there we go. Okay, back up. Of course, we're building a new subgenre here that wasn't on the original family tree. Behemoth, Balfagor, and Blasphemy, the holy, unholy trilogy of Blackened Death Metal. Yes.
I think we have a candidate for my favorite comment of the week.
Okay, first candidate. This is
do we got?
Dizchu. Add every band with goat in the name.
I like goats.
Goats are
I
great.
like goats.
Yeah, a
They're
lot of goat
typically
love at Banger.
sacrificing them, so
But we
It's
are
not so
going to
great.
take a break from this to
Okay.
go to the guest choice.
Okay,
Because
okay.
It's time.
So,
All
guest choice, and I don't want to give this away, but perhaps a bit unorthodox.
I'm sweating a little bit.
Yeah,
It's not
so-
the lights either.
Lay it on us, Jason Deaville.
Well, maybe grab that magnet and throw it up here. and
Okay.
let's surprise everyone.
This is the right one, right?
Yeah.
We're breaking the mold. It begins with an S, not a B.
What is it? Here we go. Boom. Can you see that? Do we need a close-up?
Do we need a moment of silence? Do we need a moment of absorption here? Jason has just put the Sepultura magnet on the Blackened Death Metal board. The internet hasn't broken. I think we're still on the air. Go.
Let's do this. All right, Sepultura. As everyone knows, they've kind of informed many subgenres, being thrash, death thrash, new metal, perhaps even rap metal hybrid. Who knows? No one discounts what they've done. So what they did do that maybe some people don't know is they released a demo in '85 called Bestial Devastation.
I remember.
And then followed that up with an album in '86 called Morbid Visions. Both albums are similar to what Blasphemy did 5 years later on their full length. It was proto-thrash, proto-death. It was heavier than the thrash metal at the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't obviously called Black Death at the time, but I think going back and listening to it now, you can hear kind of, you can hear that blasphemy element in it.
Yep.
Um,
And
so-
hugely influenced by, of course, early Venom,
Right.
Early Sodom,
Celtic Frost,
Destruction.
yep.
They were huge fans of the European death thrash black
Yep.
sound.
And in my research, they're the one band, that album specifically, Morbid Visions, that's kind of influenced the biggest bands from both genres, both black metal and death metal. So
So let me ask you, by Schizophrenia, have they moved on?
I think by Schizophrenia they've moved on,
Right.
and you can start hearing that Sepultura sound,
Right.
that core Sepultura
A
sound.
little more
So-
thrashy by that
Yes, a
album.
little catchier, a little more European.
Yes, Lisa.
The internet says, oh God, no.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, like,
Okay, well, let's see some comments. Bring it on.
well, it's basically just no.
No.
That's the comment.
No. Well, that's not good enough. We
If
need
we-
to know why.
If we add blasphemy, you've got to. It's the same
I'm
thing.
backing my man Jason up here. There are bands in the history of heavy metal that you cannot possibly slot into one genre. They're
Right.
so influential, and I would argue that Sepultura might be one of those. As you say, thrash, death, blackened death metal, and with roots, of course, they spearheaded the whole groove metal sound.
And keep in mind, we're talking about one album. One
So
album.
there you go.
So-
There you go. Is this what we're saying here? We're going to go to the board, Lisa. This Brian Osorio, he doesn't agree. They don't. They, being Sepultura, do not have the lyrical content of a blackened death metal band.
This album does.
Morbid Visions, Brian, go back, have a listen. Nothing remotely blasphemous. I disagree. It's pretty satanic at that time. Vessel Brokius says maybe you should do a proto extreme metal episode to classify bands like Old Sepultura. Okay, another episode. And Michael Flaherty says Sepultura is blackened thrash. Okay, so
Perhaps.
there's an argument that maybe Sepultura belongs over there. Well, maybe just to maybe I'm just gonna kind of set them over here because
Kind of a bridge
we've
between.
got we've definitely got some debate here. Are Sepultura blackened death or blackened thrash? I think is the question. Lisa.
We actually have a first on Horns, which is that we have a caller,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
We have a caller who's been tuned into our discussion
Yeah.
and has a few things to say.
Okay.
We have from England, from Akercockie,
Awesome.
line, we have another Jason.
Okay.
Second Jason.
Can you take this call?
Oh, Jason, are you there?
I sure am. How you doing?
Oh, very good.
Can you guys
Thank
hear
you.
Jason?
We can hear you. Just.
Oh, okay. How's that?
That's good. Yeah, tell us what have you got to say. Thanks for joining us for Blackened Death Metal. It's nice to speak with you. I'm a fan of your band. Nice work, my friend. What are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts about Blackened Death Metal?
Yes, sir.
Well, it's something that's been brewing for a long time, hasn't it? I mean, my recollection of the crossover first came in the mid-90s. But it was just a very, very select few that were actually kind of attempting to fuse the styles to do something new. You know, I think up until, you know, kind of 95, 96, those two styles were still very, very much distinct. But, you know, it was around that time that bands actually started getting creative and branching out to merge the two genres into what I think is now, I don't know about an established subgenre. It's still all a bit wishy-washy, but hey, you know, there's a whole dearth of bands out there doing it.
Very cool. Well, you know what? The board is going bonkers since you've called in, so I'll just shout out Nick Pardon says, fuck yeah, Jason from Akercocke. Aziz Hammer, hell yeah, Akercocke. Nate Sharma, Akercocke in caps lock. Andres Magia says, fuck yeah, Jason from Akercocke. And then further down, Lisa, if you can scroll, Artur Felipe Castanha says, to me, they should be mentioned on this list due to that they can continually for the genre for years, and Jason Mendoza for his legacy. Andres continues, Akercocke has to be added. Using death metal, black metal, and prog like no other, they were able to take you on a 4-minute song and showcase a sound like no other without ever getting boring, generic, or predictable. Not to mention that Jason could go from a very low growl to absolute chaotic black metal shriek in just seconds. And he could also sing like Maynard, James Keenan on the clean acoustic parts. To me, this is the best band this style has to offer. Yeah, so Jason, you've got some supporters out there.
Well, there's some deeply flattering praise there for sure, you know. Yeah, and I'm humbled and honoured to hear those comments. Yeah, it's something that we set out to do from day one, was to try and you know, merge different influences to try and do something a little bit different. And it's just something that's logically progressed as the band's career has gone on. So I would hope that each album sounds markedly different from its predecessor. But there was definitely a phase when, I think probably around the second album, when the sort of the blackened elements crept in quite profoundly. That would be the album The Ghost of Mendez. And then on Quarantine, which was our third album, we also developed that idea further, but with the inclusion of other sounds before we started to get even more proggy. But yeah, I mean, it was always the intention to set out to do something new, and the logical starting blocks for us were the kind of primordial starting points of death metal, which was our background, and then black metal.
Fantastic. Well, Jason, I'm glad you took your time with that answer, because it took me the entire time to still spell the band's name properly on the board, because admittedly I still always struggle with spelling your band. But Jason, that was awesome. Thank you for calling in, and hope to see you down the road sometime soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Cheers.
Take care, y'all. Bye-bye.
Our pleasure. That was cool.
Now don't call in, people. When you have a complaint, we're not taking everyone's call.
That was cool. Yeah, Akercocke, what are your thoughts on that? So many Jasons.
Yeah, well, you know, initially I struggled putting them on here, but after hearing him so eloquently explain their place in the subgenre, I can't argue. But I will say that, to me, initially, I felt it was a disservice putting them in Blackened Death Metal, because I think they have far too many elements to be pigeonholed in something that's structurally a little basic. Mm-hmm. Blackened Death Metal isn't progressive metal. Akercocke is progressive Blackened Death Metal.
Right.
Their sound kind of runs the stratum.
Right. So maybe perhaps the counter argument is that they have such a broad sound and so many progressive elements to their music, particularly with the vocals, as one of the someone pointed out, that perhaps they're sort of stepping outside pure blackened.
Yeah, almost like reason. To me, they kind of fit that category of Enslaved, Eshon,
right.
Some of those more progressive, extreme bands.
Interesting point. Anyway, that was cool. Lisa, what are we doing next? Are we going back to the board for more bands?
Yeah, we do need to add more bands. Just a couple like clear additions
Okay.
that people want. But first, the Sepultura debate. Is
Okay,
not over.
Joseph Senzik chimes in about Sepultura. He says, put Sepultura above the board like Suffocation for deathcore. They influenced the genre, but weren't anything close to it.
That could
Okay,
be. Got
okay.
a point.
Can we see Sepultura?
Right between the goat beards.
Between the beards?
Yeah.
Between the beards and me? There we go. Sepultura.
Oh.
Sorry. I know.
Boo.
I get that humor from you. Anyway, okay, back to the board. Okay, I think we've omitted one obvious band from the Blackened Death Metal discussion, and that, of course, is Dissection. Vaughn Espeleta says, Dissection, question mark, Dissection, Dissection, Dissection. Nick Pardon says, greetings from Belgium. Hello, please tell me Dissection made the list. One of the first bands to successfully combine black and death metal. Thrash Maniac 99 is back, welcome. Since I like making controversial choices, what about Dissection? Not sure it's so controversial, since they combine black metal with mellow death, and albums such as Soberlane and Storm of the Lights Bane are important albums. We do have a magnet. Would you agree, Jason Deaville?
I agree that they possibly belong, only for one important reason.
Okay.
That I'll mention now.
Yes, please.
They're much more melodic than any of these bands.
True. It's true.
Bands like Sacramentum, bands like Winterland, bands like Dawn, those bands, although Blackened Death thrash metal, the melodic element was just far too prevalent for me to ever really kind of consider them a quintessential Blackened Death metal band. If you were to do a branch on melodic Blackened metal, which you could probably do,
Sure we could.
They would definitely be at the top of that. But maybe we can leave
This
it up
tree
to the,
can be as big as we want it to be. Interesting you bring up melody, though, because when we did death metal a couple weeks ago, that was a dividing line. I think that was something I actually kind of gathered from that discussion, is that death metal, from a pure standpoint, retains that dissonance. It retains that it doesn't always resolve. You don't get these melodic sections of the song. So I think there's a kinship here in the sense that once you start stepping into that too melodic realm, for instance, like a band like Amon Amarth, you're clearly no longer in the kind of death metal or blackened death metal area.
Right, and I think that's true. What we've established here is some very pummeling, brutal fucking blackened death and dissection. Like you said, they kind of break. They kind of break away from what.
And it holds for early Sepultura because they got more melodic with Schizophrenia and Beneath the Remains.
That's
Is this where we need to start a new sub genre?
I don't know.
Are there enough melodic blackened death metal bands?
Well, Guitar Bro 221 says Dissection was melodic black metal. Headbanger, say it twice. Dissection are melodic black metal, and Zane Knight, that's cool. I will argue against Dissection being blackened death metal. The only album of theirs that has traces of the distinct heaviness that is related to death metal is their last effort, Rain Chaos. I'm going to put melodic black metal over here. It's going to take me 4 minutes to write it, but let's put it up. Melodic black metal, because perhaps we're on to some other branches of the tree. And earlier, of course, blackened thrash metal came up as well. Phil Sedunik, pardon me, I really expected to see more Deicide, Morbid Angel, Vader, the best sorts of bands up here. Well,
I mean, Gavin brought them up and said no one would agree with them. Phil agrees with them.
Deicide. What do you think, Jason?
I think their first self-titled album has blackened elements to it. Songs like Dead by Dawn, Glenn. I don't know. I still think, to me, they've always been a death metal band. It's hard for me, in my mindset, to kind of discern the blackened elements there.
Okay.
I can't argue that, now, 30 years later, there's some proto black stuff going on in the early Deicide albums.
To support the argument, here is a band that clearly has a Blackened aesthetic, right? With a much more death metal musical approach. So in that sort of very basic criteria, I suppose there's an argument there.
Yeah, I suppose if we were
Are they not black enough for you to belong, or are they not death metal enough? Sounds like they're not black enough for you to belong.
Yeah, maybe not black enough to belong. Obviously death enough.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's a tough call for me.
Okay.
Maybe off to the side.
Let's put it over here. I know Gavin supported it.
Right.
And let's see, does anybody else have anything to say about Deicide?
There's too many bands they want you to put up before they get into that.
Okay, let's move on. Wang Chung tonight. I added the tonight part. In the realm of Blackened Death Metal, none are heavier than the mighty Angel Corpse. Include them on your tree or your bloodline will be cursed with 10,000 mongoloids. I may steal that line for a lyric. Zach Melvin McNutt. Necrophobic really need to be atop this list. They were really the first guys to play this style. Both Behemoth and Balfagor started as straight up black metal. Necrophobic were pretty much blackened death right from the start. And Freakiniki says that Necrophobic need to be at the top along with Blasphemy. They came from the Swedish death metal scene, but had a more blackened element to their sound unlike others. Plus they were early to the party. Okay, backing up Angel Corpse it was, right?
Yep.
What do you think?
I'd struggle to put them on here for the same reason I wouldn't put Goat Whore on here.
Okay.
I think they straddle the thrash end of things a little too much. There are some death elements there, obviously, similar to what Destroyer 666 is doing or has done. I kind of put Angel Corpse into that same category. So, you know, a blackened thrash with death elements, perhaps, but. In the same vein as these bands, I don't think they don't touch on the extremity, the fucking in-your-face pummeling that the bands we're looking at here.
This is a rarefied group. Not a lot of bands are making it through the eye of the
it's
needle
tough.
here, Jason.
The bees.
The bees.
Yeah.
The land of the bees. And then, of course, there was Necrophobic.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on Necrophobic?
Necrophobic, to me, sure. The early stuff definitely could be up here.
Okay.
I think later on they started incorporating not too much melody. They just started incorporating more melody than what we would associate with Blackened Death Metal.
Okay, well, maybe for argument's sake, we'll get Necrophobic up here. Necrophobic.
Early stuff for sure. I'm not arguing that.
Can't control the paranoia.
Yeah, we gotta
I'm
get some
scared to
bands
die.
up here. We're like getting down to like the last few minutes of the show.
Whoa.
So we're looking pretty
Got some
stingy.
magnets.
No, Dovidas Auglis says Necrophobic actually did BDM style on purpose. Random comments here. Philisteum says that Deicide is pure death metal. No trace of black atmosphere, so you've got an ally there. Maurice Mosca, and I don't know, I gotta grab this because it's just one of my all-time favorite logos. Morbid Angel, Hast. I love the way that they pronounce Hast. It's like the Rammstein. Hast to be up there. Every new morbid death metal band out there, be it Grave, Miasma, Degial, Vorum, Early Tribulation, etc., uses their sound as a base and are clearly influenced by the Morbid Angel. Agree? Disagree?
Again, in the same way that Deicide.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure. Again, I'm old school. I look at Morbid Angel as a purely death metal band.
Right.
I struggle to hear any blackened elements there, but you know, I could be wrong.
Okay, it's in the aesthetic, but maybe that's not quite.
Now they did make the
enough.
death metal board
They did make the death metal
Right.
board. I believe they did.
along with Deicide, correct?
I believe
Yes,
so.
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I would leave them where they are.
Okay. Fine.
With death metal.
Okay.
All right, this is the end, guys. Like you gotta really make your case
Wow.
at this point. So-
Okay. Here we go. Rick Adams. Better see some God Dethroned on that chart. And Delicious Dishes. I'd like to suggest Dragged into Sunlight as probably the most vile band there is in all of metal, and for being one of the most important newer bands of the genre. Okay, first, God Dethroned. Thoughts?
Sure. I think they're one of the more underrated bands of blackened death metal for sure. I mean, been around a long time. Their Bloody Blasphemy album, incredible album. Again, underrated. It takes what the bigger bands of black metal, such as Emperor, the bigger bands of death metal, such as Morbid Angel, and they combine them together to be sort of a hybrid of both genres. So again, completely underrated, awesome band. If you haven't heard them, go, because they do belong here.
Does this guy know his stuff or what? Don't go toe-to-toe with Deaville. You will get pummeled, much like a Behemoth riff. Dragged into Sunlight? Tell me
Admittedly,
about
I
this
don't
band.
know a lot about them.
We're going to
So-
pass. Why? Because we're old school,
Yeah.
probably. Something like that. I wanted to add to the board, too, just for edification. We also talked about Blackened thrash, right?
We did. Yep.
So for future reference, and just so everyone else out there, you know, that wanted bands like Goat Horror added, like myself, Blackened
Angel
Thrash,
Corpse, Destroyer 666,
Yep.
bands like that.
That there's maybe some merit to doing a Blackened Thrash show. Okay, Lisa, I think we're gonna start getting down to the end here.
We are trying to get down to the
There's
end.
one magnet. Can we do it quick?
What is
one
the magnet?
behind you?
We got-
Merkskog.
Okay, Merkskog.
Yes.
Super guest, Jason
Yes.
Deaville.
Whoa,
Pulling
pulling
rank
rank.
here in the last minutes of Blackwell.
I love
Who
him. I
invited this
gotta.
guy?
I gotta do it.
Please.
Okay. So
No one has mentioned them, so go.
Yeah,
Merkskog.
better be good.
Yep. Merkskog from Norway, featured members of Emperor and Zyklon. And what they were doing in, I think it was 2002, with their Supreme something. What the hell was that album called? Supreme Massacre. Basically, it sounds like Behemoth's Demigod, but 4 years earlier, it's just smashing, pummeling Blackened Death Metal nonstop. The Blackened elements are there, the leads are there. I don't know, they're just an incredible band, spawned off of the Blackened elements of Emperor, and with the Behemoth sound mixed into it.
Okay, no argument from me. Volbet says Archgoat. They've been going since 1989 and have pretty much made the same bestial Blackened Death Metal ever since.
Yep, and I believe they're behind you too.
Oh, are they?
Are they?
They are.
Yeah.
Here we go. It's a late flourish on Blackened Death Metal. We had like 4 bands, and now it's like, anybody else want to be on the board? Archgoat, you agree?
Yeah, their 93 album, Angel Cunt, incredible album, kind of a, the album title kind of explains it all.
Yes.
So basically they just took what Blasphemy were doing and upped the evilness and that aesthetic incredibly. And in fact, the album cover, there's a demon fucking an angel.
Hello.
Yeah, you can't go wrong.
That
with
ain't Lockhorns, I don't know what is. Nick Pardon agrees. Hell yeah. Merkskog. Didn't
Merkskog,
expect.
I like that.
Didn't expect them to be mentioned, but yes. Lisa,
Let's continue this in the comments, everybody.
let's do
Yes.
it.
Keep
Let's
telling
do
us
it.
about these bands. We want to hear what logos you like.
Yep.
We want to start talking about logos. And I'm going to pick the winner
Of.
for this week's comments
Okay.
as the one that I liked right off the top.
Okay.
Dishu. Every band with a goat name. Let's just add them because we have 2.
That's right.
Good job.
So,
I
Yeah.
like it.
More goats. We got goats here. We got a goat right there.
oh,
Not there.
We're in business. Okay, well, we're going to wrap it up. Great episode, Blackened Death Metal. We've created a new branch on the heavy metal family tree. We've actually also thrown up some potential future episodes on the sort of further splintering of the extreme metal spectrum. Jason Deaville, I want to thank you for joining me, sir.
No
Great
problem.
job.
Thank you very much, Sam.
And you bet anytime. I want to thank everyone, of course, off camera. We've got Lisa, now on camera, Daniel, Andrew, and Craig. The show will be archived, and if you are watching it in the archive, reminder once again, this live streams every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Subscribe to the channel. Do we make it over the 50K mark during the episode? Anybody?
Craig? We don't know.
I don't know.
No, we're not there yet.
If we didn't, you got to get us there
Get on
and
it.
then get us to 100. Follow us on Apple Music. Jason's own playlist of Blackened Death Metal tracks is up now. We are the official metal curators at Apple Music. We return next week with something a little bit different. We're going to start to do an Essential Albums series. And next week, it's Power Metal with the almighty Martin Popoff.